Hey, are you a non-gearhead? Is this you trying to figure out how much pressure to put into your car's tires? Well, time to stop being so helpless and learn about tires. Welcome back to Way of the Wrench and our series on how to become a gearhead. Today's topic is everything about air tire pressure. How much do you put it in? How do you put it in? What happens if I'm going off-roading? Can I do anything to help there? I've got a trailer and I want to carry more weight than I usually do. What should I do with air pressure then? And we're going to talk about all those topics and more today. All right, I just finished looking on the internet for a little bit to see what kind of videos are already out there on how to fill up your car tires. And I'm blown away. There's like 400 or 500 of these things and they all pretty much suck. They are 2-3 minutes of step-by-step for people who have absolutely no idea what they're doing in life, let alone on cars. And that's great, but they're still missing some of the crucial info that would be good to know. And they're very how-to step-by-step that when you're done watching the video and you're done that job, you forget it because your brain is not going to use that info for long term. So today's video is going a little bit more in depth, make some connections to other things, and make it more useful for you. First up, people that don't know any better, they tend to think that the proper tire pressure is rated on the side of the tire, and that is not where you should be looking for that information. The value that's printed in PSI on your sidewall is telling you what the maximum pressure this is for any vehicle that this tire is installed on, and if you go above that, you run the risk of having this thing blowing up on you. To look up the proper PSI, or pounds per square inch, for your vehicle, you have to look inside your driver's side door. So you open up your driver's side door. It's going to be on the end of the door here or inside the door jamb, and what you're looking for is a decal with that information. So this one is right here. So in this case, this decal is going to tell us a whole bunch of information. It tells us the standard tire size and rim size for the vehicle for front and back, and it also tells us what our cold tire pressure. So in this case, it wants the front tires to be 32 psi or 220 kilopascals. And one thing to note, they have your kilopascals and your PSI units of measurement, but if you want to be a gearhead, we are using standard American terminology, so we are using PSI. Don't be that weirdo who starts claiming that you have so many kilojoules or kilopascals or anything like that in the shop. Each wheel has something called a valve stem that sticks out from the tire, and it's a little bit flexible. And on the top here is a little dust cap, so you have to screw that off and put it somewhere so you don't lose it. And it's important to know that this is just a dust cap. It doesn't hold air pressure in. Its job is to keep dust and dirt and salt and stuff out of this area inside here where your valve core is, inside of your valve stem. If dirt gets in there, then it can hold the seal open slightly, which will cause an air leak out of here. The very first thing we should probably be doing is checking what the tire pressure is already and then adjusting it accordingly. So we're going to need a tire pressure gauge like this, pretty cheap, $5-10 from a parts store, and all you do is you push in that center little piece of the metal there, make sure that you're going on to the fitting nice and square, and when you push down on it, a little bit of air will come out, and depending how much pressure you have in the tire, it'll push this white gauge all the way out. And wherever the end here matches up with your gauge, then that'll tell you what it is. So you can see this is in PSI, so I got 20, 30, and everything in between, so it's 2 PSI per line. So push it in, and you can see this is about 32, 33 pounds per square inch. And if you're at a gas station or a professional shop, you might see a tire inflator tool like this attached to an air hose. And right here, it's got a gauge in it. And wherever that little brass pointer arrow is pointing, once you have it plugged into the tire, it'll tell you what the PSI is. So like this. And on the end here, there's 2 ends you can use. This one's usually used for motorcycles, so you can kind of get into tight areas. And then this one's just for regular vehicles. So you can see this one's 30, 31 PSI. If you find your tire pressure is low in your tire and you got one of these inflators, then when you push on this lever right here, you get air pushed in through the same valve. So you just put it on, check which pressure is. In this case it's 30 and we wanted 32, so push the lever, and now we're at 32. Now it's really important to note that when you are trying to figure out what the pressure is, you can't do that with the inflator on, otherwise you're going to get a misread because you're reading the air pressure coming from the compressor and not the tire. Let's say our tire pressure is too high and we need to get some air out. So right inside here, inside of the valve stem in the valve core, there's a little needle kind of valve thing. And if you push down on it, either with a piece of a screwdriver or a key or anything really, you can push it down and you can hear the air escaping. Like that. Now you won't know how much until you get a tire pressure gauge, but you can get rid of the air like that. Now another gearhead tip, if you're doing this on something that you're going to go ATVing or a dirt bike and you're going to go 500 kilometers into the woods, you really want to make sure you don't have a leak from a valve stem. So little tip trick is you spit on a finger and you put it down on the end inside the valve. And then you look for any bubbles. If there's no bubbles, then you know that there's no slight amount of air leaking from there, and you won't be stuck in the woods 500k from nowhere. The last thing you do is you just replace your dust cap so that dirt doesn't get in there and start causing a leak. If this tire is supposed to have 32 psi for this vehicle, what happens when somebody's put in 50 psi because they don't know any better? Well, that tire tread, the surface up here, is supposed to be pretty much flat on the road, and so it has maximum contact. Now when you put way too much tire pressure in there, it tends to balloon out that tread, so you end up getting kind of like a domed surface on that tread. And now the only part that's wearing, because it's the only part that's touching the ground, is the center of that tread, and so you end up getting a pretty distinct wear pattern where the center of the tire tread is worn out or less depth of tread than the other sides because it's the only one touching the ground. The other condition I see all the time is that people are lazy. They don't take the time to put in their tire pressure and they don't check every couple months to top it up. And so what happens is these tires normally start to lose about a PSI a month, and over 6 months, over a year of not filling them up, those tire pressures are way lower than they should be. So what happens in that scenario is the side walls or the side profile of the tire tend to try to keep the tire up even though there's no air pressure or very low air pressure in the tire, and so the tread starts to kind of cave in on itself. But because the side walls are being held out, the edges of that tire tread start to wear out a little bit faster and a little bit more than the center because the center starts to sink away from the surface of the road. Right, automotive tires lose about 1 to 2 psi every month, and they tend to lose a little bit more during the colder winter months. So it's really important that you are checking your tire pressures regularly, and here's why. And number one, fuel economy. A tire that is proper PSI will have less rolling resistance, less friction going down the road, and you save that on gas. Second reason is wear on your tires. If you have a tire that is grossly overinflated or grossly underinflated, you're going to have weird wear patterns that are going to cause you to replace your tires earlier than expected. And third reason is stability. If we have our tires at proper pressure, then it's going to steer and brake and go like we want it to, instead of being all loosey-goosey whenever we decide to try to make changes on the road. Now, every vehicle is going to have their recommended tire pressure, and that is for general everyday driving, but there are going to be times when you're going to want to increase the tire pressure or decrease the tire pressure, and this is why. If you've got an off-road vehicle and you want to go off-roading on some big rocks and gnarly sections, you want the vehicle to be able to kind of cushion all of those hard bumps, and by lowering the pressure inside your tire, you get a little bit more spongy, a little more bouncy of a ride, but with the side consequence of it being a little bit not stable. But if you're doing rock crawling, that's actually kind of a benefit because you get the vehicle to articulate a little better side to side to be able to grab onto rocks. And then the lower inflation also helps the tread of the tire kind of mold around certain rocks and gets a little bit better grip to get you through that section. Now when we're talking about off-roading, rock crawling PSI, you're thinking about 15 to 20 PSI. You kind of play with it with your vehicle, but it's important to know that once you're done having your fun, you still have to get it home, and probably there's a highway in the way, so you're going to have some way of having a portable air pump so you can get it back up to your stock recommended tire pressures. Now the only real reason why you would increase your tire pressure beyond your recommended factory spec is if you wanted to increase the amount of load you can carry in your vehicle. Now there's kind of a fine balance, because as you go up to that maximum tire pressure, which technically lets you have the maximum amount of load carrying capacity, you are also kind of sacrificing ride quality. It's going to get a lot more firmer, and you're also going to have some increased tire wear. So this isn't an all the time thing. This is, I'm going to tow my camper, I have a big load to carry in my truck just to go to the dump and back. That's when you're going to increase that pressure for that minimum amount of time. All right, you filled up your 4 tires on the vehicle, but don't forget about your spare tire. Everybody forgets about this guy at least once a year, probably twice a year with every kind of checkup or tune-up on your vehicle. inflate the spare tire. That way when you have a flat tire, you have a spare tire that has air in it and you're good to go. All right, most trucks have the spare tire underneath, and often it's a full-size spare, so exactly the same size that's on the vehicle, and so you can inflate them to whatever the vehicle pressures say you're supposed to have them. Now most cars will have their temporary tire in the trunk. Just take a look underneath the carpet and you'll find it there. And most cars want to have some space savings, so they have to have a temporary tire, which is often quite small, and the pressures are quite higher. They're about 50 to 60 psi. That way that tire still has air when you need it 4 or 5 years down the road. Now if you have a green cap on your valve stem, that's letting you know that somebody has put nitrogen instead of air inside of your tires. Now nitrogen molecules are way bigger, and so they tend to not be able to leave the tire as easy. In fact, it takes about 3 times longer for the tire pressure to drain out than regular air. Alright, back in the day you were actually supposed to do a pre-driving inspection, and you were supposed to walk around the vehicle and make sure that you don't have any flat tires. But nowadays, vehicles have something called TPMS, Tire Pressure Monitor System, so that does it for you. With this new technology, a light will pop up on the dash whenever you have 1 or more tires that are below specification, letting you know you have a potential flat or just low pressure and you need to go fill them up. Look forward to a full in-depth video on everything about TPMS in the future. Alright, that's a wrap on another video from Way of the Wrench and on how to become a gearhead. This time on everything you needed to know to inflate these tires, and hopefully you were able to learn something and now have some more information to make you feel like a gearhead. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, just put them down below and I will get back to you as soon as possible. And until the next time, take it easy.